This is the Fairness Doctrine and How to Fix America, Part 2. In this video, I'm going to bloviate about the consequences, the social consequences of vetoing the Fairness Doctrine. Now, if people are only listening to each individual station out there being its own little echo chamber, there are obvious social consequences to that that profoundly affect the individual. When people are never hearing fair and balanced reporting, that's going to reflect on and in society at large. In something as ubiquitous as conversation. If people are no longer used to hearing differing opinions on any subject, if all they're exposed to is each individual station being an echo chamber, well, the individual is going to mimic that behavior. People watch a lot of television, they spend a lot of time online, and when they're spending all that time seeing people behaving badly and having little or no tolerance for the opinions and viewpoints of others, that is going to have a profound social consequence, which is this. And this is especially true of Fox News viewers, because they're the dumbest of the dumb, the least educated, and religion plays a large part of that. The religious right-wing GOP, they want an echo chamber, and religion is really bad for that. Religion wants an echo chamber. It doesn't want to hear dissenting viewpoints. It just wants to hear what it wants to hear. So that affects the GOP. That affects conservatives in the United States and Canada, because Canada borrows a lot of bad habits from the United States. Now, where the individual is concerned, if the individual is only listening to echo chambers, that affects people on an individual basis. It affects households. It affects workplaces. I've worked at places like warehouses and plants where there's a certain political viewpoint expressed by the owners, and they want that reflected in the mentality of the workers. Otherwise, you will put yourself and your job at jeopardy if you dissent. And the vetoing of the Fairness Doctrine is, I don't know to what extent it's responsible, but it plays a role. So there it is. Now, where the individual is concerned, socially, it makes people less tolerant. And when people become less tolerant, they become more narrow-minded, less open to little things like education. And let me illustrate what I mean by that. It's not as simple as it sounds. Every person who has gone for higher education, college, university, even trade school, you're exposed to a wider world that you didn't know existed when you were a kid living at home, and even when you were in grade school. This very narrow viewpoint in your early life, and all of that gets shattered the instant you go to university. People who go to university suddenly discover that their parents are uneducated dolts and into destructive ideas and politics that are no good for society. And education has a tendency to, shall I say, divide people, but only in the sense that um, people who get an education become less tolerant of narrow mindedness and stupidity. Um, Now, the vetoing of the Fairness Doctrine represents a kind of blowback against uh, education itself and in society. If you don't want to hear opposing opinions, you're not going to grow as an individual. You're not going to grow as a society. You're going to be going down the rabbit hole, and society as a whole is at greater risk of dumbing down across the board in more areas than ever before. And it's not just education, it's uh, alternate or differing viewpoints is part of expanding your worldview. Not everybody out there thinks like I do, or has had my experiences, or hasn't had a set of experiences that have led to me becoming the person I am today. And so I have to think. Different experiences lead to different outcomes, lead to differences in personality, in outlook, in worldview. And that's all good because that leads towards education. And education leads to tolerance and understanding and patience. Uh, Stupid people tend to be impatient and tend to react with violence and abruptness because they're stupid. They don't want to be confronted with things they don't understand. And it's understandable. They want to be or seem like they're in control. And when stupid adults are exposed to well educated children, um, the result is a lot of negativity and a lot of desire to slap them down. And that's also a GOP right wing, religious right wing Christian trait. Reminds me of a farm I worked on decades ago. This old fella um, didn't like the fact that I had been to university, and he didn't like his farm workers getting ideas, as he put it. And that twigged a memory in me of reading about that kind of attitude in the 19th, 18th, 17th centuries, where when the middle class was beginning to raise its head, uh, with the rise of the middle class, there was blowback from the powers that be that didn't want people getting ideas, didn't want people thinking. And that's how, come to think of it, that's how the British brass band and the U.S. concert and brass band traditions got created. They were company bands, they were made work bands, and the idea was to get people to buy into bread and circuses and to not think about politics. Because the rise of the middle class meant less dependence on and interest in the 1% of the day and in royalty. Um, anyway, the bottom line is with this fairness doctrine repealing is that it is sending us back into mentality wise into a feudal quagmire uh, where people are thoughtless, stupid, and unable to think for themselves, unable to think logically. There's another thing. Logic should be taught at all levels in school so that people have the ability to see through uh, the powers that be that want to lead them around by the nose. Create social unrest? Tough! Tough titty! Too bad. The world needs a little social unrest. Anyway, that's the end of part 2. I hope it made you open your eyes and think at least a little bit.